Hello everyone, welcome to Love Wave's story. I found my husband's second phone on a random Tuesday, one of those quiet, boring days that are supposed to be completely normal, and that detail still scares me the most, because nothing bad is ever supposed to happen on days like that. It wasn't hidden dramatically, not locked away or buried deep, it was sitting inside a box with old tax papers in our closet, like it belonged there, like it was just another ordinary thing in our life, and I remember thinking it had to be an old work phone. Something forgotten and harmless, even though my hands were already shaking before I turned it on. There was no passcode, no hesitation required, the screen lit up instantly, and the first thing I saw wasn't our wedding photo, not our dog, not anything connected to our real life. It was a blurry close-up of a woman's shoulder, bare skin, intimate, the kind of photo you only take when someone is very close to you. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and I told myself not to look any further. I told myself I didn't want to know. But I opened the messages anyway. There wasn't just one conversation, there were many, dozens of them, different names, different emojis, different tones, different versions of the man I slept next to every night, sometimes playful and reckless, sometimes emotional and vulnerable, sometimes cold and distant, and in one conversation he said he lived alone, no wife, no marriage, no me. That's when it hit me that this wasn't just cheating, this was a double life. And I was sitting on the closet floor holding proof that my husband was a stranger when I suddenly heard the front door open and realized he was home early. He called my name from the hallway with the same calm, normal voice he always used, the voice that used to make me feel safe, and I didn't answer because I was frozen, still sitting on the floor, staring at the phone while scrolling faster, like if I read everything quickly enough it would hurt less. I saw dates, locations, inside jokes I didn't understand, complaints about his stressful home life. About a wife who didn't listen, didn't understand him, didn't excite him anymore, and I knew he was talking about me even though he never used my name. His footsteps came closer, my heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it, and without thinking I locked the phone and shoved it under my thigh like a scared child hiding something they shouldn't have. He appeared in the doorway, smiled, asked why I was sitting on the floor, and I lied, saying I was looking for winter clothes, and what scared me most was how steady my voice sounded. He nodded, kissed my forehead, walked away toward the kitchen, turned on the sink, and didn't suspect a thing, which told me this wasn't new for him, this wasn't dangerous, this was routine. As soon as his back was turned, I unlocked the phone again and noticed something I had missed before, one contact without a name, just a single letter, and unlike the others the messages weren't flirty or careless, they were careful, planned, talking about schedules, backup stories, what to say if she ever got suspicious. And when I scrolled up to the very first message my hand started shaking again because the sentence staring back at me was simple and terrifying. She trusts me completely. We have time. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, inside the box, under the papers, because suddenly I understood something very clearly. If I confronted him right now, he would lie, and he would lie well. I stood up, washed my face, practiced my normal expression in the mirror, and walked into the kitchen where he was leaning against the counter, scrolling his real phone like nothing in the world was wrong. He asked how my day was, I asked how his meeting went, and we smiled at each other like actors who knew their lines by heart. While he talked, I watched him differently, noticing how relaxed he was, how confident, how comfortable lying to my face, and I realized this second phone wasn't a mistake, it was a system. That night I didn't sleep, I just listened to his breathing and wondered how many nights he had done the same thing next to other women while I trusted him completely. The next morning, when he left for work, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I did something worse, I planned. I memorized his routine, the times he left, the times he came back, the excuses he used, and I decided I wouldn't say a word until I understood who that woman with the single letter really was, because something about those messages felt different, deeper, more dangerous. 2 days later, when he was in the shower, his second phone buzzed inside the closet, once, then again. And I knew that whatever was waiting on that screen was about to change everything. I stood in front of the closet listening to the shower run, staring at the box like it might explode if I touched it, and when the phone buzzed again my hand started shaking so badly I had to sit on the bed just to steady myself. I pulled it out, turned on the screen, and saw her letter pop up again with a new message that said he was late and she was worried, not angry, not jealous, just worried, like someone who actually cared about him. I opened the thread and read slowly this time, noticing details I had missed before, the way she talked about his stress, his childhood, his fears, things I didn't even know she knew, and that hurt more than the flirting ever could. Then I read a message from him that made my stomach turn. He told her he loved how safe he felt with her and how one day things would be simpler, clearer, easier. That's when it hit me that this wasn't a side affair, this was his emotional home, and I was starting to feel like the guest. The shower turned off, I panicked, locked the phone, shoved it back into the box, and jumped into the bathroom pretending to grab a towel, my heart racing while he smiled at me through the steam like I wasn't carrying his secret inside my chest. For the rest of that day I couldn't stop replaying her messages in my head, the calm concern in her words, the way she spoke to him like she knew him deeply, maybe better than I ever had, and I started questioning every memory I thought belonged only to us. When he hugged me from behind while I was making dinner, I stiffened without meaning to, because suddenly his touch felt borrowed, like something he gave out freely and not something special anymore. He noticed, of course he did, and asked if everything was okay, and I said I was just tired, which was true in a way. I was exhausted from carrying a truth he didn't know I knew. That night he fell asleep quickly, his arm heavy across my waist, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was doing the same thing somewhere else, staring into the dark and waiting for him. Around midnight his phone buzzed on the nightstand, his normal phone, and he didn't wake up, but I did, instantly, my heart jumping even though I already knew it wasn't the second one. A few seconds later, it buzzed again, and then I saw him roll slightly, half asleep, and silence it without opening the screen, like it was an instinct, like he knew exactly who it was and exactly what to do. That small movement told me more than any message ever could, because it showed me how practiced this all was, how natural, and that's when I realized I wasn't just deciding whether to confront him or stay silent, I was deciding whether I wanted to keep living inside a lie that worked perfectly as long as I pretended not to see it. The next morning I watched him leave the house like I always did, kissing my cheek, grabbing his keys, saying he'd be late because of work, and for the first time I didn't believe a single word, but I smiled anyway, because smiling had become my armor. As soon as the door closed, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I checked our shared calendar, our bank app, our cloud storage, looking for cracks, and they were everywhere once I knew how to look. Small hotel charges labeled as business expenses, calendar blocks marked as meetings that didn't match his emails, photos backed up automatically from a device I didn't recognize, and each discovery made my chest tighter but my mind sharper. I wasn't spiraling anymore, I was collecting. By the afternoon I knew her name, not from a message, but from a restaurant receipt saved in his email drafts, and seeing it written there, simple and real, felt heavier than reading any love confession. She wasn't a fantasy, she wasn't a distraction, she had a name, a routine, a place in his life that fit perfectly around mine. That evening when he came home, tired and distracted, he told me a long story about traffic and deadlines, and I nodded, asking the right questions, playing my roles so well that he relaxed, and as he relaxed, I understood something terrifying. He trusted me completely, and that trust gave me power I never asked for but now couldn't ignore. That night I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to confront him yet, and I wasn't going to expose her either, because I needed to see how far this really went and what he would choose when no one was pushing him. A few days later he told me he had a weekend work trip coming up, said it casually, confidently, like he'd said it 100 times before, and I nodded while already knowing from the calendar that it wasn't work at all. On Friday morning, after he left, I followed him, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my heart beating so loudly it felt dangerous, and I kept a safe distance, telling myself I could turn back at any moment. He didn't go to the office, he drove across town, parked near a quiet cafe, and waited, and when she arrived I recognized her immediately, not because I'd seen her face before, but because of the way he looked at her, open, soft, relieved, like he had finally arrived somewhere he wanted to be. They hugged for a long time, too long for something casual, and then they talked, laughed, touched each other's arms, and I sat there watching my husband be someone I had never met. But then something unexpected happened. She pulled out a phone, showed him something, and I saw his face change, not guilt, not desire, but panic, real panic, the kind you can't fake, and that's when I realized this story wasn't going to end the way I thought it would. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see it in his body, the way his shoulders tightened, the way his smile disappeared, the way he glanced around like he was suddenly aware of the world again. She didn't look angry, she looked firm, like someone setting a boundary, and when she stood up without touching him, I felt a strange twist in my chest that wasn't relief or jealousy, just confusion. He followed her outside, talking fast, gesturing, clearly trying to fix something, but she shook her head and walked toward her car without looking back. He stayed there for a moment, staring after her, then sat down hard, head in his hands, and that image burned into me because I had never seen him look that defeated, not with me, not ever. I drove away before he noticed me, my thoughts racing, replaying everything I'd just witnessed, wondering what kind of secret could scare a man who was already living a double life. That evening he came home quieter than usual, distracted, checking his phone constantly, and when I asked how his day was, he hesitated for just a second before saying it was fine, and in that pause I knew something had shifted, something I still didn't understand but was now part of our marriage whether I wanted it or not. Over the next few days, I watched him differently, noticing patterns I had ignored before, the way he left his second phone charging in odd places, the way he paused before answering my questions, the way he smiled at me, a little too fast, like he was afraid I would see through him, and I realized I had been living with a stranger for months, maybe years, without even knowing it. I started keeping track, small things, the times he left for meetings, the calls he pretended were from clients, the texts he answered in the car, and every little detail fit together like pieces of a puzzle that made me feel sick and sharp at the same time. One night, I found a voicemail on the second phone, and I froze when I heard her voice, calm, warm, almost casual, asking him about his day, asking if he was okay, making him laugh, and the sound of it made me feel like an intruder in my own life. I played it again and again, listening to the familiarity he had with her, the way he answered, the way he laughed, and I realized that he wasn't just living a second life, he was emotionally living with her, and every lie he told me, every smile, every touch, had been measured to keep me in place while he shared his heart somewhere else. By the time he came home that night, I was no longer confused, I was calculating, watching, thinking about how to act, how to survive, and how to make him see that I knew everything without saying a word. A week later, I decided to push the boundaries without exposing myself completely, so I asked him to help me with a small home project, something that would take a few hours, and I noticed the way he smiled, easy, relaxed, like nothing was wrong, and I realized he was completely unaware that I had stepped into his private world and seen it all. While he worked, I kept the second phone in my pocket, my fingers brushing it occasionally, feeling the weight of the secrets inside, and I imagined showing him the messages, imagining the look on his face, the panic, the disbelief, the excuses he would try to make, but I didn't. I kept quiet, because silence had become my weapon, and patience my plan. Later that evening, when he went out for a short walk, I unlocked the phone and read the newest messages, and I discovered something I hadn't expected, a hint of fear in his texts, a hesitation I hadn't seen before, as if the carefully controlled world he had built was starting to crack, and I felt a strange satisfaction mixed with dread. I realized that he wasn't invincible, that even someone living a double life could slip, could make mistakes, and that realization gave me both power and terror, because I now held the map to his entire secret life, and I didn't know whether to follow it completely or let it go and pretend I never found it. By the time he returned, I had made my choice, at least partially, that I would watch, learn, and wait for the moment when I could finally confront him with certainty, because this was no longer about revenge, it was about truth, and I needed every piece before the final move. The next morning, he left for work again, and I sat at the kitchen table pretending to scroll through emails while my mind was running wild, tracing his route, imagining where he was really going, and planning how I could catch him without him knowing, and I realized how much I had changed in just a few days, from someone blindly trusting to someone calculating, alert, aware of every move he made. I followed him again, keeping a careful distance, and watched as he parked near a small apartment building I had never noticed before, his body language different from the cafe, tense, hurried, like he was afraid of being seen, and I felt a shiver go down my spine because this was new, this was different, and it meant there were layers I hadn't even imagined yet. I watched her arrive, the same calm demeanor, and I noticed something I didn't expect. She carried a small suitcase, and the way he looked at her this time was not playful, not relieved, it was serious, almost desperate, like he was afraid of losing something important, and I realized that this wasn't just emotional comfort, this was another life he had built and depended on, and it scared me more than any betrayal could. I kept my distance, my heart pounding, my hands tight on the wheel, watching him kiss her hand, hear her laugh, see her glance around before they went inside together, and I understood that if I confronted him now, I might shatter everything, including myself, so I stayed hidden, watching, learning, planning. That night, he came home later than usual, exhausted, distracted, and I could tell he was carrying the weight of something he didn't want me to see. The way he moved, quiet, careful, avoiding eye contact, like he was stepping around invisible traps. I pretended not to notice, pouring him a glass of wine, asking about his day, letting him talk while I observed him like a stranger in my own home, and I realized how strange it was to sit there, holding the truth, while he unknowingly revealed pieces of it in every gesture, every sigh, every word. I checked the second phone once he fell asleep, and a new message from her appeared, short, urgent, demanding answers, and I felt my stomach twist, because the calm, controlled world he had tried to maintain was starting to crack under pressure, and I could feel it too, the tension in the messages, the anxiety in his replies, the cracks in his perfect act. I stayed up hours, watching, reading, feeling the rage and sadness collide, realizing that this wasn't just a lie anymore, it was a living thing, growing stronger every day, and I had to decide whether to destroy it or watch it collapse on its own, because either choice would change everything forever. By morning, I had made a plan, not for confrontation yet, but for understanding fully, because I couldn't act blindly anymore. I needed to know who he truly was when no one else was watching. A few days later, I decided to test him, to see how carefully he controlled his two worlds, so I casually mentioned a fake work obligation, something I knew he couldn't verify, and watched his reaction like a hawk, noticing every flicker of hesitation, every micro-expression, every pause, and I felt a strange thrill mixed with fear, because this was dangerous, and I was playing with fire inside my own marriage. He smiled, laughed, made a joke, and reassured me with words that were smooth, practiced, like he had said them 100 times before, but his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of guilt, a tension he couldn't fully hide, and I knew that despite his confidence, he was already afraid I was noticing, already calculating, already reacting. That evening, when he went out for dinner with colleagues, I waited a few minutes, then unlocked the second phone, and I discovered something I hadn't expected, a message from her that said, "You need to be careful, she's watching more than she lets on," and my hands froze on the screen, because suddenly I realized she knew too, she had sensed me, my presence, my observation, and it changed everything. It wasn't just me holding secrets anymore, it was a silent game with rules I didn't fully understand. I sat there for what felt like hours, reading, rereading, piecing together their exchanges, feeling a mix of panic, anger, and a dark satisfaction that I was finally seeing the truth unfold in real time, and I knew the next step would either destroy him completely or finally give me the clarity I needed. After reading that message, I couldn't breathe for a moment, because it meant I was no longer invisible in their story, I was a variable they were accounting for, and that realization flipped something inside me from fear to cold focus. I waited until he came home, watched him carefully as he talked about his dinner, noticing how he avoided details, how he over-explained simple things, and how his phone never left his hand, like it was a lifeline, and I understood he was scared now, not of losing me, but of losing control. That night, while he slept, I unlocked the second phone one last time and scrolled deeper than I ever had before, back months, then years, until I found it, a conversation where she asked him directly if he would ever leave his wife, and his reply made my chest go numb, because he didn't say yes, and he didn't say no, he said he needed time, stability, the right moment, and that he couldn't afford chaos yet. In that moment, everything became clear. I wasn't the woman he loved, and she wasn't either. We were both parts of a system designed to keep him comfortable, admired, supported from every angle. I put the phone down gently, like it might shatter if I dropped it, and for the first time since this began, I didn't feel angry or desperate, I felt calm, because I finally knew exactly who he was, and knowing that meant I could finally decide who I was going to be. The next morning, I woke up before him, watched him sleeping, the same man I had loved and trusted for years, and I realized I didn't need to confront him in anger or tears, because I already had all the power by simply knowing, by seeing everything he thought I would never see, and that knowledge gave me clarity I had never felt before. I made my coffee, sat by the window, thinking about the choices ahead, and I understood that this wasn't about revenge, it was about me deciding what kind of life I wanted, with or without him, and how much of myself I was willing to give to someone who had built a secret world around me. When he came downstairs, smiling, pretending everything was normal, I returned the smile, calm, composed, carrying the secret in my chest like armor, and I realized I could live with this truth or walk away from it entirely, but either way, I would never be naive again. So, to everyone listening, If you've ever been in a place where love feels like a lie, remember that knowing the truth is the first step to choosing your own path. Never let anyone make you small, always trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to protect yourself. If you liked this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on the bell to never miss a story, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you would do if you were in my shoes.